And as the threat of mass deportations and ICE raids ramps up, advocates are urging immigrants to know their rights.
For more, we're joined by Bill Hing, professor of immigration law at the University of San Francisco. Bill, always appreciate your time. Let's talk about Janice Piece there. Advocacy organizations handing out what's called these red cards, reminding people of their constitutional rights, reminding them they don't have to open the door, answer questions, or sign anything. I know you've been getting a lot of calls. How does this help calm some of the fears we're seeing in these communities?
Well, it calms fears in some respects that people understand that they have a constitutional right to remain silent and that they don't have to open the door to an ICE officer unless that ICE officer has a warrant. And so it's helping, but honestly, there's a lot of anxiety in the community. And unfortunately, I think that the Trump strategy in part is to instill fear, and that's happened.
And that clearly is obviously the sort of the overarching goal with these immigration orders that have been rolled out so far by the administration. You hear about people not showing up to workplaces in the Half Moon Bay community. That's just one example. How much do you feel like we sort of see that ramping up and intensifying here in the coming days and weeks?
I think that as soon as you start seeing some ICE actions in various parts of the country, you're going to see more and more parents not sending their children to school. You're going to see more and more parents hesitant to go to work. I think that some folks are contemplating leaving the United States, and maybe that's a victory from the Trump camp. And so, yeah, I think the anxiety is going to increase, and we're going to see that at workplaces and schools.
Yeah, Bill, organizations are also putting out advice on forms for immigrants to carry and forms not to carry. Can you explain some of the tips as we bring some of those up on the screen here?
Yeah, so here's the thing. Obviously, if you have lawful permanent resident status or DACA status, it's safe to carry that. But the truth is that if you're undocumented and you have evidence that you were not born here, that's all that ICE needs to institute deportation proceedings against you. Again, if you carry a foreign passport, some Mexican migrants have something called a matricula card. It's an identity card that the Mexican consul issues. If that's all you have, if all you have is evidence that you were not born here, that document can actually lead to your deportation hearing.
There are also, I believe there are some numbers that people should call, but if someone finds themselves in a situation where they are being asked about their legal status in this country, what do you recommend that they do?
Yeah, if somebody sees an ICE action, they should call one of these rapid response numbers, because there are immigration attorneys, volunteer immigration attorneys standing by to help. But I think that folks should also call community-based organizations, from Catholic Charities to Legal Services for Children to Garesen to Dolores Street Community Services to La Raza Central Legal, to get an immigration consultation. Because it turns out that a sizable number of folks that we meet who are undocumented, they actually have a pathway to getting lawful permanent resident status. And so they need to get their case and their family situations evaluated by a competent, honest immigration consultant.
Bill, shifting a little bit here to the news of the day, hearing that more troops are going to be sent to the southern border to act sort of in a law enforcement presence. And so when you hear news like that, what do you expect to see there at the southern border, particularly from these members of the military?
Well, they're going to be carrying arms, and that's always scary because you just never know when something accidental happens or even intentional happens. We don't want to see the loss of life unnecessarily at the border. The border has been militarized in the sense that there's been a lot of electronic stuff for years and years, but to see military dispatch there is going to be a frightening scene, and I think it's going to be questionable, the constitutionality of this, because there has to be a national security problem in order to send military to the border, because military is not supposed to work on domestic issues. So I think there may be a challenge to whether or not sending military to the border, armed anyway, is actually legal or not.
Yeah, and that is sort of the legal question that's being considered right now, because active duty troops are prohibited from doing law enforcement according to a certain act that is in place in this country. But it sounds as though there are conversations maybe happening within the administration about invoking the Insurrection Act, which would allow troops to be used for civilian law enforcement. What are your thoughts on that and the implications of going down that path?
That's pretty unheard of, to be honest with you. The research that I've done, the last time that something like that happened on U.S. soil was when during desegregation, when the military was needed to be sent to schools to help black children get enrolled in their public schools, and that was deemed an emergency situation, a national security problem then. And we're not talking about insurrection at the border. The vast majority of folks there are trying to come in an orderly fashion. They were making appointments, and now they've been canceled. But it isn't people storming the borders of the country. It's people who have been trying to come in lawfully and patiently.
Yeah, certainly a conversation we have had and will continue to have with you, Bill Hing, professor at the University of San Francisco in immigration law. Certainly always appreciate you joining us, sir.
Thank you.
All right, well, we just had